of course, what I did was I stopped recording like an idiot. But hopefully now we're back and everyone will be back on to be able to
How
see.
much? How much did you lose? Do you think?
Well, it's just that we had to start and stop that the screen, the interview again. So yeah, so just flipping back to what we're doing here. This right here is some of the artwork that we're doing for it. So this right here is Knives. Obviously, she knows what she does for a living. One of the other fun characters that we've done is, I'm not going to be able to show all the fun characters. Let's not do that this time. But anyway, Graham, welcome to the show. It's nice to meet you. Where are you calling in from?
I'm in London right now, South London to be precise. A place called Tooting Bec, which is a very silly name, I know, but it's Tooting Bec,
All
and
righty.
it's about 1:10 in the morning right now,
Oh
and
my goodness.
it's also
Thank
very
you
very
very.
hot. It's been the hottest day of the year so far, so it was about 92 degrees today, which is unusually hot for London.
That is extremely hot. Yeah, global warming. And we're facing it kind of everywhere, aren't we? And so, were you born and raised in the UK?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, actually from the West Country of England, which is uh, the city of Bristol, the outskirts of Bristol. That's where I was born, and that's where I'm originally from. But my parents moved to Wiltshire, which is if nobody knows Wiltshire, what they will know, it also has one of the most famous landmarks in Britain, which is Stonehenge. Uh,
Yes.
so Wiltshire is famous for that, and also I went to art college in Salisbury, which has the largest spire in the country as well, and has an amazing history, which is goes back to Roman times and onwards, and actually pre-Roman times as well. So it's got a sort of pagan background, and then
Mm.
Salisbury right now it's not one of the biggest cities in Britain. It's actually quite a small city comparatively, but it's basically where I trained and sort of learned my skills essentially.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so I have to ask this question. When did you know that you wanted to be an artist?
When I was about 2 years old, I think probably.
Drawing with crayons, right?
Oh yes, yes, on the walls, in the books, just like kids always do.
Oh, that is amazing. And but then you want to take it seriously, right? So did your parents want you to go to university and become a lawyer or a barrister or anything
No,
like
not at
that?
all. No, no. I think probably I didn't have any particular ambition. I don't think. Certainly up until the point where I was at art college, to be quite honest. But we knew that my main interest was in drawing and making models and kind of just visual stuff.
Yeah.
I'd everything I did at school really ended up with some sort of drawing element to it. So
Mm.
history, geography, whatever. There was always a lot of drawing that I'd add into essays or anything like that at all. So I think the thought was when I was at school that the obvious way of converting that into making a living would be to go into graphic design. And I didn't know what graphic design was at the time. My dad explained to me. It's basically he said we were looking at a cereal packet. Said this is basically created by a graphic designer. So
Yeah.
in my head, being a graphic designer was designing cereal packets. So that's how much I knew about the subject. But so I enrolled on a graphic design course at the art college, and it's fairly clear that all my solutions to the projects were ultimately illustrated solutions, and so it was all about the painting part of it. And I learned a lot about the theory of color and composition, foreshortening, perspective, all those grounding tools, which really helped me in sort of developing a style and kind of a sort of professional approach, I guess, to the work.
That's yeah. So it's funny that your dad sort of brought you towards the commercial aspect of it. Like I'm pretty sure he wanted to make sure you got a job. It's it,
Well, yeah, and also the thing is, because I did 4 years in all. The extra fourth year was a chance just to focus completely on the illustration work.
hmm.
And I'm glad I actually took that opportunity to do that, because it really, really focused what I was doing. But yes, we had it drummed into us that ultimately, if you're going to make a living, you have to have a very a business-like approach to the work. And we were told that you need to keep accounts and you know present the work professionally. And so it's all that was a really important aspect, and something which I guess unless you've been through that kind of part of the education process, it's quite difficult for people coming into the business to understand that that's such an important element of everything. So the work is one thing, but also the professional approach to the work is also very important as well. And that's something I learned at art college.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's great. I mean, a lot of people don't learn that, and then they have a passion, but they don't know how to make a living out of it. It sounds like you had figured that out fairly early. But I would really kind of fashion you more of as a fine artist, really, than an illustrator, wouldn't you? Or certainly a graphic designer.
I mean, at the college there was a fine art department, and we studied fine art, and so the influences probably do come from some of those studies. And we looked at the history of art, and from sort of, we looked at the pre-Renaissance stuff, and the sort of more contemporary work, the sort of futurists, cubists, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, all these different styles and periods, which all had some sort of influence in the work that I did. But my influences also came from elsewhere at the same time. So we did go to galleries to see stuff, and we looked at kind of quite unrelated things, if you like, as well. I mean, I remember some of the key exhibitions that I saw whilst being at art college, where there was a big exhibition about Islamic art, for
Mm.
instance, but also there was a major exhibition in London at the Institute of Contemporary Arts, which was all about laser work and holograms in particular.
Wow.
And so it was an amazing display of holographic photography, which really did influence me a lot, because it's not so much the holograms themselves, but it was the nature of the light that was created on holograms with the laser, and the colors as well, the range of colors in the laser beams as well, which really did have a profound effect on the way I kind of viewed my work, trying to bring in that kind of feel and texture into what I was doing. So, as I say, those influences came from all over the place.
Yeah, it's fascinating how light plays such a huge role in art, and it's something that I learned later on in life. And even when we talk about film and television as well, the lighting just plays such an important role, as does the soundtrack. So it's great that you learned that early in your career. It sounds like.
I mean, yeah, definitely I mean, you talk about lighting, certainly, because I was watching films, from the early age, and I did pay attention to the lighting, the color
Mm.
palette and the lighting in particular, um, because I learned so much about how things are sculpted in two dimensions through the use of lighting. So films were a huge influence in my work as well.
Now, so you wanted to be an artist since you were very, very young. Did you also know that you wanted to be like when did you pick up your love for horror?
Probably from the age of about 4 or 5, I think, maybe.
Wait, hold on.
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was literally, on TV at the time in Britain, we were getting transmissions of the Monsters and the Addams Family.
Okay,
So
got it.
really, that's probably where that started. and I didn't really understand the. I mean, these were presented as like comical confections, if you like. So I didn't really know the Universal monster origins of those programs, and also the work of Charles Adams, which was kind of sort of quite film noir, but also had lots of horror basis as well. Uh, so really, that's something I hadn't discovered at the time, but that really was something I learned about probably when I was about 11, 12, and I really began to explore horror films. I mean, I couldn't watch the films, I wasn't allowed to stay up late to watch these things at the time, and I couldn't get into the cinema to watch horror films. But what I could see were the film posters and the lobby cards outside the cinemas, and
Sure.
also there are a number of magazines which catered to people with my kind of taste, if you like. Um,
Fangoria, for example.
well, I didn't see Fangoria probably until a lot later, in my 20s, I imagine, when I was living in London. I don't think it just had appeared before on the shelves at the time. But there were magazines which were aimed at kind of kids, really, I guess. Off the top of my head, there's World of Horror was one of them. A magazine called Target, which was aimed at boys in particular, which took in other things as well, like sports and such like. But they did have a big horror aspect to it as well. So they published lots of photographs from the early Universal monster films like Frankenstein and Dracula, the real classic stuff. So that's really where I got my grounding in Universal films. And also, of course, at the time, um, the Aurora Monster hobby kits had started appearing on the shelves in the UK as well. So my first one was Dracula, and
Mm.
then I built up a collection of those. And the box art, really influenced me as well. The James Balmer artwork on those boxes was just phenomenal, and the colors, the color palettes he used were really influential on my own work as well.
Alrighty, so it started out when you were watching those old TV shows. Now, were you a Munsters person or an Adams Family person?
Well, I saw the Monsters before I saw the Adams Family, so I would say the Monsters probably. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And but then it sounds like you're incredibly influenced also just by the art surrounding the films, not even necessarily seeing the films, but really sort of enjoying how they were depicted, in the movie posters and whatnot.
Well, absolutely, and I think at the time, uh, probably in the sort of late 1970s, more so, they had started showing the Hammer horror films on TV late at night, and so I was influenced by those very quickly, and also I think simultaneously to those we had a lot of the classic horror films,
Mm.
not just the Universal black and whites, but things like the Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe films, and that's where I sort of first saw Vincent Price appearing on the screen. So and also of course those Corman films were really brightly coloured as well, just like the Hammer films as well. They really explored the colour because black. Horror films up until that point have been largely black and white, and sort of through to the 1950s, and it's in the sort of late 1950s, certainly when Hammer started exploring full color versions, really sort of emphasizing the uh, bright red of the blood, and then these sort of quite beautiful color palettes and things like, I mean, the Bride of Dracula as well is a very good example of where they really went all out with the color. Almost, if you thinking about Mario Bava's color palettes in his early films as well, they kind of almost seem to echo the Hammer horror style.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, Technicolor, right? It just was so bright and vibrant at the time,
Yeah.
and now what we see is so much more toned down from there.
Mm.
So I know exactly what you're talking about. And so when you finally got a chance to get into the cinema, what was that first horror film you saw? Do you remember?
At the cinema, well, I would struggle to kind of remember, to be quite honest, because I think I've seen so many films on TV that by the time I was actually watching horror films at the cinema, it
Yeah.
was probably something like Carrie, you know, maybe Alien, I guess, if you call that horror film. But yeah,
Sure.
so probably when I was at art college and I was old enough to go to the cinema and watch 18 or X certificate films. So probably Carrie would have been one of the first cinematic horror experiences.
Yeah, yeah, and it sounds like you remember that. I mean, that was such an iconic movie for a
Yeah,
lot of different
definitely.
reasons.
Yeah. Well, and also, you know, again, it had explored a lot of color in the film as well. I mean, I just remember it being, you know, quite a lurid looking film, uh, and you know, for me, that I could see that you know, horror films had so much more potential than other genres for really exploring um, a sort of stuff which is outside of the normal life, if you like, though, just sort of hyper real palettes.
Yeah. All right, you're obviously a fan. You're now coming out and becoming this amazing illustrator. What was your first gig? What was your first paid gig out of university?
Well, I guess the first professional work in the first year, 2 years, would have been non-horror stuff. I mean,
Cereal
education.
boxes, maybe?
Sadly, not. No, I've never designed a cereal box yet. You know, there's time yet. Uh, but no, educational books, very simple stuff, black and white cartoons. Uh, but then the first actual horror film poster, which I'm really embarrassed about because it's not a very good piece of work at all, was for what was the last of the Amicus anthology films, The Monster Club, with again Vincent Price starring, John Carradine also.
Oh
But
wow.
yeah, the poster wasn't a great poster, and I'm a bit embarrassed about it. But
But
the
I have to ask though, like you went from uni and doing a couple commercial gigs to finding your way in a Vincent Price film,
mm,
making its poster. How did that come about? There's got to be a story.
well, I wish there were an interesting story other than the fact that you know I moved to London because that's where all the work was going to be. You know, there was no internet, of course, at that time.
Yeah.
All your interviews, you know, your prospective interviews with clients were all made by telephone. You'd arrange appointments, so I had to drag around a portfolio of work. Largely, it was like, you know, college work. Um,
And then one of those big art
yeah,
portfolios,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Big A2 portfolio, and yeah. So one of the, I mean, basically what would happen is I'd look at film posters on the underground or, you know, pasted up on the walls. You'd check the distributor's name, and then you'd go through the telephone book, find out where their offices were, and
Right.
you'd get the number as well. And you just call, ask to be put through to, you know, whoever the art director was or the art department, and then try and arrange an appointment. So it just happened that one of those clients, potential clients, actually did like the work and decide to take the risk on somebody who's basically just out of college. But they kind of thought, you know, the style was appropriate for the film. And actually, with the Monster Club, there were two pieces of artwork. The first one, which I was happier with, they felt that the tone of it was a bit too overtly horror, because they were going
Interesting.
to market the film to kids, bizarrely. Um, and so I had to repaint the whole artwork with more child-friendly colours, unbelievably. So that's the poster which actually went out ultimately. But then the next poster I worked on was for the Fun House, and then My Bloody Valentine is a double bill poster. Again, they are early pieces of my work. They're not very good. You know, I'm very critical of that early stuff. But the really important um, poster was The Evil Dead, and that was 1982. I think so. It's literally 2 years out of college, and one of the clients, potential clients I went to was Palace Pictures, or a brand new company, and they
Was
oh
this
my
the
God,
poster
I'm
right
looking
here?
at terrible poster. I dare you. But yeah, yeah, I'm very embarrassed about it.
I can only
Uh,
imagine what it would have looked like, you know,
mm,
if it wasn't so because you could see how kitty it is. It's
yeah,
cute. You know, everyone's cute in it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's child friendly.
Child friendly. I love
Yeah,
it. And Vincent Price is great. And then you said you did the Evil Dead movie poster.
yeah. Yeah, so it's a UK campaign, which is very different to the American campaign. It's if you probably uh, yeah, you have to type in UK quad. There it is. You had it just there. You go. It's the sort of green heads, the purple background, and the two reels as well.
This one here.
That's the second film. That one at the top, yeah. So
Oh
that was
wow.
my Evil Dead poster. And the thing is about the Evil Dead is that uh, I was given the job pretty much immediately from the film company. They literally just picked up the film from Cannes Film Festival,
Mm,
saw my work, and also they saw in my work a sort of a punk aesthetic. And I think that's really the way they wanted to take the marketing for the film. They were essentially marketing it at actually people who like music, punk rock, and the sort of very early goth scene as well. So that's really what is going on behind that poster. And For me, I thought I was emulating sort of horror film posters from the 1950s. I mean, that's what was going on in my head, really. I was trying to go for a sort of very trashy B movie aesthetic because that's really where I saw the film in many ways. Uh,
sure.
probably, um, probably with the colors, I think I was just looking for something um, which was very unnatural,
Hmm.
and the um, purples, greens, and yellows I think we're also kind of considered to be quite psychedelic as well. And in
Hmm.
fact, actually, somebody did point out to me at one point, one of a future client, looking back at it, that he felt that, well, he wanted to know if I'd taken acid, and I never had. But he said, yeah, he used to take acid in the 60s. He said these are the colours that he saw. So as far as he was concerned, it was like an acid poster. uh,
Wow. This is remarkable. And then
I
did you do
took that
this
as a
one
compliment.
as
Also.
well?
So Evil Dead 2, yeah, because the film was so successful in the UK, obviously they wanted to follow the same template. So same client, elements which you can see in common with the first poster as well, in terms of the composition and layout.
Hmm. Yeah, it's quite brilliant. So it sounds like after that, you're probably forever shoehorned into
Well,
horror.
because the Evil Dead was released in the cinemas um, simultaneously to the VHS, which was unusual at the time. Usually there was a holdback before VHS comes back, but they knew that the film would like do really really well on video, home video, and so they took that risk to release the two simultaneously. Uh, and that's really, I think, where the Evil Dead took off in the UK, specifically on VHS. And so I've got an awful lot of work, VHS cover work, which is all the clients said, give us an Evil Dead. Basically, just want to emulate because they have that style, just stuck with me for about 4 years, and it was very hard to break out of that. But I did, so because the next very significant poster, 1984, was Nightmare on Elm Street, and again, it was a very different campaign to the American campaign. I think he had, was it Matthew Peak? I think created the Nightmare on Elm Street posters for the US.
Hmm.
So again, I think the same client over here, Palace Pictures, they wanted to go in a different direction, and actually they weren't going to use me at all because it's in their heads. The Evil Dead was the style that I had, and that's what they thought I was going to try to give them. But I argued that actually I could work in other styles as well. So the
Let's see if we
poster
can
for Nightmare,
see if we can share this
of
poster. I don't
course,
know if
oh,
I've
yeah,
got
yeah.
the right one here. Is this the right one?
No,
All right, give me a
if
second.
you type in, there you go, you got it. That's it,
This is
the blue
it.
one. That's the one, yeah,
Wow, very, very different style.
completely, yeah. I mean, that was very important to me that it had to look different. So whereas the Evil Dead was very, very brightly coloured and psychedelic, this was very subdued and just, you know, almost quite dreamlike, and that was the whole point, to make it like a dreamlike poster. And also, of
Sure.
course, nobody knew who Freddy was at the time, so he was just a silhouette in the background. Um, but the other unusual thing about this poster is there's no eye contact. So Heather's face is just like a sleeping face; the eyes are closed,
Hmm.
and that's quite an unusual thing for a film poster, because usually film posters work with eye contact, and there isn't any in this poster at all.
Wow, that's quite remarkable. And I remember Nightmare on Elm Street because I think that was really sort of one of the first horror films that I got a chance to watch, and was a breakout success here, for sure, in the United States.
No, again, it did very well. I mean, I think people love the film. And, you know, it really felt fresh at the time as well, in the same way that
Yeah.
Evil Dead did as well, and really kind of um, hit its stride. And I think, again, I think a lot of people who are really into music kind of related to the film. I think, you know, it kind of fitted into that sort of goth kind of aesthetic as well for a lot of people. Uh,
Mm.
and yeah, there's some sort of slightly retro aspects to it though, which kind of, you know, pick on the I don't know. For me, it's like some 1950s nostalgia as well in the film, which kind of comes through. And I think, you know, Freddie was an instant hit, you know, with people. So when I worked on Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, we went the opposite way from the subdued colours into something very, very primary coloured, and just a huge, big portrait of Freddy.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me just pull it up really quickly. It's so funny. I can just tell your work. Just right from the bat, I can be like, okay, yeah, I'm on the right page. This has got to be it.
Well, it's odd because you don't set out to um, yeah, the quad poster is a sort of bit of an afterthought, but you can see the raised hands poster. That was the core essential poster for
Oh,
Freddy's
this one
Revenge.
right here.
Yeah, yeah, with the school bus.
And now you're really featuring Freddie.
Oh
in
yeah,
the-
in bright daylight. You know, there's no point in trying to conceal, because he was going to be the star of the show. So yeah, it's a Freddy show, very much so.
Wow. Now I
But yeah,
see.
there's never any conscious effort to create a style at all. It's just something that kind of just evolved and developed. And you know, to me, I didn't feel that the work had an overall feel which people would recognise as mine. But that's the way it kind of evolved over time.
Yeah, so I noticed that there's a little bit of difference between this one and this one.
Mm. I think
Um,
that would have been the film poster. The brighter one would have been the VHS cover. Uh,
okay. Yeah, and you mentioned that this was sort of like the perfect time for VHS. So like this was the height of VHS, really, and the height of home video.
yeah, I think the lesson was learned with the Evil Dead that when they
Mm,
discovered that the Evil Dead, you know, it was designed to be the quad poster, then they said, right, we're going to release this simultaneously on VHS. And of course, the format is completely different.
yeah.
So I had to hastily repaint the Evil Dead for a VHS cover. Whereas with Freddy's Revenge, um, they knew probably its biggest market would be on VHS, the biggest viewing audience. So this was designed really for the VHS format. And
Mhm.
then we created a quad poster as a sort of almost like an afterthought, really, just because it was
Yeah.
necessary for the cinema release. So it's not a piece of work I'm particularly happy with, but it's you know, it was a requirement that had to be made.
Sure. Yeah. Well, they all look amazing, amazing to me. All right. So what after Nightmare on Elm Street did you work on? I mean, you've worked on, gosh, could you even name how many pieces you've worked on over your career?
Well, there's a lot of work, you know. I mean, things at the same time as all the horror stuff I was doing, I was still doing some educational publication work, magazine covers. I was doing work with the music press, the New Musical Express in particular, the NME, were a client of mine. So there was some record cover work as well. I was working with a band called Lords of the New Church, who were a sort of an offshoot of the Damned and the Dead Boys. So it's Steve Bators and Brian James, with called that band. So yeah, there was a lot of music stuff at the same time. Magazine work, book covers. So yeah, a whole variety of things. In fact, probably the horror stuff was kind of like about 50% of what I was doing at the time. Whereas now, of course, it's pretty much 99% of what I do, which is the way I like it, of course.
So if you think about, so I'm just going to share the Lords of the New Church. Can you point out which one it was?
Yeah, it's the top the top one you can see there. That's the one. Yeah.
Oh wow, this is a piece.
Yeah, they'd had a photo shoot taken where they're all sat around this kind of like a banquet, and really the cover I wanted to do was going to be lots of purples and greens and reds, something very rich and very decadent. And I was kind of almost thinking, you know, something which looked like it would be not satanic, but you know, something which just looked almost regal and also dangerous at the same time. But Steve, the singer there, he really was obsessed by Salvador Dali, and what he wanted was something which would be the sort of palette that Salvador Dali would have used, and with these kind of dirty browns and oranges, and he had all these ideas he wanted to add it in there, which like sort of slightly surrealist elements. So it's kind of not where I would have taken it myself. So in many ways, it's a bit of a compromise. And I remember weirdly illustrating a review of the album for the New Musical Express, and I remember being mortified when I read it because although the reviewer didn't particularly like the album, he really hated the cover. So, yeah, I think his reviews seem to be revolving around my cover more than anything else. And I did think, oh my god, my career has just ended now. Unfortunately, it hadn't though, so that was okay. But yeah, I mean, I think the band were very happy with the cover, so they were happy, and the record company was happy. So and fans seemed to like it, so you know, it did its job.
Yeah, I think that's all that matters. And then you've done a few other famous album covers as well. You and I chatted about a couple in particular. Do you want to talk about those?
Well, yeah, one of the around the same time actually, for the same company, it was Miles Copeland's label, IRS Records. Uh, they they had the Cramps signed to them, and so I got involved in a compilation LP called. Now you had in the States, you had Bad Music for Bad People, I think it was called, which is a yellow cover. You can see there.
Mhm.
My cover is the black and white one next to it. Now, it wasn't black and white. It was created. In fact, if you go down below that one, you can see the red and green version. Basically, I went with the idea of sort of a B movie aesthetic, and it was my idea to do a 3D cover where you get
All right,
the
this
red
one
and
here.
green. No. It's the same as the black and white one, but it's like a red and green version. You had it just now. Oh, there we go. It's if you go down, you can see the red and green version below. There you go. There you go.
Oh, it is 3D. Got it. Got it. I see what you're saying.
So yeah, so we had the red and green specs that came with that cover, so you could see the 3D, and so that was I don't know. I came up with the idea, and they said that's great, let's do it. And then I had to learn how to create a 3D image.
Wow.
Luckily, there were a couple of books out at the time which showed you how this kind of works. It became quite complex. There are layers of artwork to create, and I had to photograph it twice. Once with the image in place as it is, and then with all the layers shifted very slightly in gradations to create the 3D effect. when the glasses were put on. I mean, we had no idea if it worked or not, but it did, fortunately, though. But a lot of people bought this album, and it did very well. In part, I think, because of the novelty of the 3D cover. But so yeah, I mean, the Cramps were my favourite band at the time, so it was an absolute joy to work on it. I had no communication with the band at all,
Hmm.
because I think Miles Cullen had fallen out with the band quite badly, and so they left the label. So really, this was a residual of their work. I think by releasing a compilation, it was like a way to get a third album out of the band without actually them recording anything. Um, so I think they were slightly resistant to the idea of the compilation being released anyway, because they were more interested in obviously releasing new material.
Right.
So this is kind of a bridge, I guess, in their career themselves. But yeah, I was very very proud of it at the time. To me, it's a very terrible piece of work when I look at it now. So in fact, actually, about 3 4 years ago, I recreated the artwork as a full color illustration, and you might be able to find it if you type in "Off the Bone" the Cramps and my name. You may find the color version, which is a much better version. So I kind of recreated it. I'm trying to see if it's there somewhere. Um, it exists out there on the. I've been able to type in and get it up myself, but uh,
Yeah.
it exists somewhere. I can
Okay.
assure you. But it's a it was a chance to go back to the cover and recreate it with. There we go. There you go. So on the top there, you can see it's the color version along. There you go. Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the difference in skill set there. That it's a much more sophisticated piece of work, and also it's a chance to work with the colors that I'd love to have used at the time as well.
Yeah, it's a very different style of art as well. Like you kind of redid it from scratch. I see.
Yeah, yeah. But it's the same image, but just a newer version.
Hmm. Hmm.
And actually, it's interesting that a few times I've been able to revisit old pieces of work and actually hopefully improve on them. So another significant piece, of course, is your very subject tonight is the Return of the Living Dead. So
Yeah.
I worked on the UK VHS campaign, which was different to the uh, quad poster they used over here, which was so there you go. That's the one, yeah. So this was the VHS cover, um,
Oh.
and one of the things they did do, there's a color, you can't really see it very well, but there's a little sort of a bit of writing below in yellow, which really highlights the soundtrack. So of course, on the soundtrack were the Cramps and the Damned, which they knew were very popular bands at the time. They thought if they on marketed it to the Cramps fans, that would actually help increase sales, which it did. Funny enough, so it's interesting that I've worked on that Cramps cover and then working on this at the same time, more or less. Uh,
So
uh,
was there always a strong tie, you think, between music and horror?
oh, absolutely. I mean, when I was at art college, I was at art college 1976 to 1980, so that was at the time that punk rock really kind of exploded in the UK. So the first UK punk band to have an album out there was the Damned. And they had the first UK punk single as well.
Mm.
So the Damned are also interestingly on this soundtrack for Return of the Living Dead as well. And the things I knew the Damned. I knew there was a film called The Damned, Village of the Damned. And I knew that there were a number of bands that picked up on the sort of horror thing, like Season of Banshee. Um, Obviously came from the film Cry of the Banshee. So I could see that there was a sort of a mix of horror and punk rock. The Cramps, of course, their imagery was horror film imagery as well. Madame certainly moved into horror imagery I think by the time that their album Phantasmagoria came out, that was very, very much a sort of in a sort of goth style. So for me, the two have always kind of coexisted and worked together. And in my work, there's always been a sort of punk aesthetic, as well as the horror film stuff. So I mean, this the Return of the Living Dead is a very important film for me at that time, that it actually brought in the music and the horror together in quite a significant way. I mean, there was a soundtrack released to it, which featured a lot of great stuff, and actually, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2 made a big thing about the soundtrack and the music. In fact, that features a track by Lords of the New Church as well. So everything's very connected there.
Speaking of Lords of the New Church, you did one of their covers too, didn't you?
Yeah, Lords of the New Church. I did the first two album covers, like the one you saw earlier on, and then the second album cover is Nothing Sacred. It's called. There we go. It's the second cover there next to it.
Ah.
Yeah.
Doesn't give us a great photo, but there we go. Oh, that one's brilliant.
I mean, again, I look at it now and I'm sort of slightly embarrassed by by my painting ability at the time, but once again, the singer Steve Bators he'd given me a sort of the basics of an idea, sort of like a sort of forbidden ceremony and this kind of ethereal figure in the flames, but also when I was looking for ways to kind of expand on that idea, one of the tracks was called Black Girl, White Girl. So I wanted these kind of characters each side, these almost servants, I guess, they're serving, again, sort of a banquet of food, a black girl and a white girl. And the person I was working with at the time, the art director of the record company rather, a lovely lady called Vermilion Sands, who herself was American. She'd moved over to Britain, joined the punk scene. She wanted to explore her own kind of recording career, I guess. There was Vermilion and the Aces. So I think Mars Copeland probably produced that for her, released the record. But she ended up being the art director at RS Records. So I worked with her on a lot of the stuff. So she mentioned to me a book called Against Nature by this author Heisman's, and Against Nature is a fantastic book, and it does feature a banquet where all the food is black. It's all being coloured by licorice, and all the foods is like aubergines and all this stuff that kind of just makes everything black, and it's a very decadent banquet scene. So that was in my mind when I created this cover. It wouldn't be obvious to anybody, but that was in my mind anyway.
It's quite remarkable. I guess some Egyptian theme as well to it to some degree.
Well, absolutely, yeah. I mean, there was, I think, at least a couple of the tracks feature saxophone solos, which kind of were actually intended to be slightly Egyptian sounding. And in fact, the guy who did the saxophone solos on the album was a member of the punk band X-Ray Specs. He plays saxophone for that band.
Interesting. I didn't know punk rock had saxophones, but I guess.
Oh, X-Ray Specs, yeah. X-Ray Specs were one of the very earliest punk bands in the UK, and they actually featured 2 saxophones at one point. So, yeah.
That's fantastic. And just really quickly, you talked a little bit about your work with Alice Cooper, and I just want to highlight that if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this is fairly recent. Is it released yet?
It's not been released yet. No, I think it's something like the 24th of July. But yeah, this really came about because I'd worked with the record company on the Damned's last album, Darkadelic. And so I built up a good relationship with the record company and the various personnel there. And they came to me with this project because Alice Cooper and the band had asked if they could find an artist who was well versed in the sort of classic horror film poster styles. And I worked on a number of posters and Blu-ray covers for classic horror films, and so they presented a few samples of my work, and they obviously liked the work, and so the idea was to create it almost like a film poster from the sort of 1940s or 50s.
Yeah.
And I mean, one issue I did have was the record company insisted that the cover be built in layers. Now my work is paint on paper, it's not digital. So the only way I could achieve this for them was to do separate pieces of work and then put them together in Photoshop in layers. So for me, the aesthetic of the film poster was kind of lost somewhat, I feel.
Mm.
But yeah, they're all painted elements, they're all hand painted elements. One of the few things I could bring in there, which was an obvious kind of horror film trope, was the castle, which you could see just on the side of the title there.
I was going to ask you what's the significance of that castle?
Well, there's no significance at all. It's an indulgence on my part. It's a way of trying to get in more horror. Really, the brief said we want the 4 members of the band, but can you make them somehow more horror film? Well, they specifically said not zombies or mummies. So that was going to be the first thing I would have done. Actually, I made them actually zombies or mummies. But anyway, what I did manage to sneak in was a few horror film references. So our guy on the far right there is almost like the vampire from London After Midnight, the Lon Chaney film. You can see there's a clawed hand. Well, that's a reference to The Fly, of course. Although it's actually a sort of a lobster claw rather than a fly claw.
Yeah.
And then Alice himself obviously has a knife there. That's the only sort of nod to horror, really. And then the guy in the middle is that's based on a photograph of Vincent Price from I think it's like The Bat, maybe, or something like that. So there are horror references in there without making them too overtly horror.
I love
And
it.
the title style itself obviously is very much in that sort of classic
The Creature of the Black Lagoon.
style. And of course adding the names at the top, like a credit block as well, and then the return album The World Was Afraid Of, almost like a tagline for a film. And then I think it even says the producer's name there is almost directed by. So the idea of trying to create a film poster look carries through with the typography as well.
And these quotes are hilarious? Are they? Did you come up with those quotes as well?
No, the band did actually. Probably Alice Cooper, I think, probably came up with those. But yeah, in the original version I put together, all those quotes were much bigger, which made it more like a film poster in my head. But they just reduced the size of those just to, I think, just to give more space to the actual illustration.
My soul needs a shower. I love it.
Yes. And of course, Alice Cooper was a good friend of Vincent Price's as well. So, when I submitted samples of my work, I did add in a lot of Vincent Price portraiture because I thought that's bound to appeal.
Yeah, for sure. And you said that you felt that you might be the most Vincent Price might be the most illustrated person you've.
Yeah, I reckon. Well, as of about 3 years ago, I think I painted him about 60 times. But that number is increasing significantly already. So yeah, I reckon by the end of the next job I'm doing, I would have painted him about 80 times, probably. If not more, actually.
Wow,
He's got such a good place to paint now. I love painting Vincent Price. And I worked on 2 soundtrack covers for Waxwork Records for Rob Zombie. Rob Zombie Presents. 2 Vincent Price films, The Last Man on Earth and what's the film? House on Haunted Hill. as well.
Mm.
And so those meant front covers, back covers, and gatefold, and then insert cards. So each version needed another portrait of Vincent Price.
Now we know one of these. We know this show.
Yeah,
Uh,
this was actually What We Do in the Shadows. Yeah, this was for the film, but it's a sort of unofficial film poster, if you like. I was approached to do a limited edition screen print version of the poster,
I see.
and the we had to get permission to do this, so it became an unofficial licensed piece. So I think we approached the film distribution company, and I think the way it worked was we were going to do a screening of the film, and then everybody who went to the screening would get a copy of the poster. Um, so the cost of the ticket price actually built in the cost of the poster as well.
Mm.
Um, and we involved the Jermaine, the obviously creator of the film, as well. And he has a copy of this poster in his office down in is it New Zealand? Yeah, New
New
Zealand.
Zealand, yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. Wow, that's some really impressive piece. Wow, thank you very much for giving us a journey through that process. As everyone should know, we do have limited edition prints that we're also offering as part of the Kickstarter, and I think we've got a few hundred already purchased, Graham.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, so I think that you'll live on in at least a couple, several dozen houses, which is going to be nice. And I'll make sure I'll get mine as well because it is really one of the most beautiful pieces of art that you created for us.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. No, I've revisited Return of the Living Dead so many times now. So I did that first VHS cover. Then somebody I know quite well actually was going to do a screening, an anniversary screening of the film, and they said, "Is it okay if we use your VHS cover?" And I said, "You can, but I'd rather recreate it, repaint it with my current skill set, which is what I did." And then there was a further Blu-ray release in the States. I think Shank Factory put it out. So I recreated another cover
Mm.
for Return of the Living Dead, and then there was a book cover about the making of the film. So that was yet another version. And then, of course, this has come along as well. So yet another version. So yeah, and I think there's yet another version ahead as well. So the return has returned a number of times.
Well, it doesn't die.
Very, very much alive, it
Yeah,
seems.
as the show reminds you, it doesn't. These zombies, these tracks and zombies don't die.
Mm.
And my understanding is that you've never played a tabletop role playing game.
No, I feel like a big fraud being involved with your project.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, it is definitely a very unique subgenre of of gaming in general, board gaming specifically, where you get the ability to actually play a character, a fictional character of your own liking. It doesn't have to be you. It could be something that's based on you, or it could be something completely out of your wheelbox. So if you lived in the 1985 version of Return of the Living Dead, what sort of character would you have preferred to portray?
Well, I would have been one of the punks in the graveyard, of course. In fact, I did actually have some communication with one of the actors,
Hmm.
which came about through the book about the making of the film. Obviously, they interviewed as many people who were involved as possible.
Sure.
Um, and it's the guy, and I apologise profusely, I cannot remember the actor's name, but he's got the sort of, he's a bald-headed guy with a sort of Mohican and like a raincoat. So
Yeah,
his character,
the main character.
yeah, he said, because I said in this brief conversation that of the characters that they're in the graveyard there, he I thought was the most authentically uh,
Punk.
realised a version of a punk that I knew from the sort of early or mid 1970s or late 1970s, and he took that as a compliment. He said he did actually make a point of looking at photographs of the scene from the 1977 in Britain, and so he had researched that kind of look. For that reason alone, that's the character I would be in the role playing.
Yeah, sure. Okay, there you go. The authentic punk. And what's funny about our game is that we actually, the way it works is you get to pick a background. And so you could pick a background like you could be a misfit or a farmer. And we have two. We've got a punk rocker and then we have a punk poser. So you could actually either of the two, living in expensive clothes that you've tattered up, just so, and things along those lines. So we have a lot of fun. Now, we're almost running up on time. We only have a few minutes left. One question I did have for you is, if they were to remake any horror film that you remember into a modern day version of it, there've been reboots of everything now. What would that film be? What would be your film that you'd like to see being redone?
I can tell you straight away, it's actually one of my favourite Hammer films. Yet it's the one which a few people seem to have seen. And actually, people who have seen it largely think it's not very good, but I actually love it, and I think it's one of their finest moments. When Hammer made The Devil Rides Out, based on a Dennis Wheatley novel, it was a very successful, because it hit the right kind of time for. I mean, Satanism had become quite big in films, and there was a big revival of the occult in the 1970s, and so I think that's why Hammer went in that direction and made The Devil Rides Out, because Dennis Wheatley was a best-selling author. It was a very popular book, and they thought on the basis of that they'd follow up with another Dennis Wheatley novel and film that. So we got The Lost Continent, which I think was called Uncharted Seas, the original novel. So The Lost Continent, if you've probably not seen the film, I'm going to guess.
I've not, no.
Shocking, shameful of you. Well, take it out. It's extraordinary because it has what appears to be a contemporary setting, and then suddenly, randomly, there are people from the Spanish Inquisition appear out of nowhere.
Interesting.
And it's also got this H.P. Lovecraft feel to it as well. So it is apparently Wheatley's book is slightly pinched from an earlier book. There you go, Lost Continent. That's the one.
From
If you catch the poster at the top, the second one in, not that one, that one. Then it's got some fantastic promises on the poster there.
Blood beasts battling over female flesh.
yeah. And is it flesh-eating kelp? I don't know. There's a whole bunch of things on there. Well, you pretty much get all of that. It has got some monsters. The monsters are terrible. But it's the ambition of the film. It's great. I mean, I think it's one of my favorites because it's so colourful and ridiculous, and you get the Spanish Inquisition as well. What more can you want? But yeah, I think it suffered from its budget, and I think that it's something that could be you could do a really fantastic remake of the film, because all the themes in it are quite amazing. There's so many different parts to it that the whole Inquisition Spanish galleon, trapped in this kind of man-eating seaweed off this island it's such an interesting idea.
So the special effects budget wasn't great. How was the storyline?
Well, the story's fine.
Yeah,
it literally is. I'm gonna spoil it perhaps, but it's an old film, for goodness sake. So it essentially has a ship that's been caught up in this seaweed, mysterious seaweed, and it's kind of it can't go any further. It's just trapped, and it's been pulled into this kind of ship's graveyard essentially. Which, and all these ships go way back as well. So it's like something which is kind of lost in time in many ways. And this island does have, I mean, that has these kind of creatures as well, so these kind of Lovecraftian creatures. But there's a stranded Spanish galleon which has, it's you know, on, when we're supposed to believe that these people have carried on breeding and still really kind of stuck in a sort of their own time warp, if you like. So that, you know, if there's a religious sect on the galleon, who have kind of just become, you know, this kind of almost inbred kind of religious group, and it's really a battle between the new arrivals and the Spaniards, but it has people who are trying to break away from the galleon as well, who are like essentially enslaved. Uh, so they keep afloat the man-eating kelp by using these balloons, which kind of give them buoyancy, and they have
Okay.
pads they tramp around on over the weeds so as not to get eaten. Uh, but yeah, it's just really this kind of battle between the contemporary and the old as well. I mean, there are some interesting themes in there, and I know that the original novel that Dennis Wheatley, let's just say, borrowed heavily from, has this basically seaweed which traps all these boats, and you know, people are trying to survive and build bridges across the boats as well. And then there's also sort of like almost like a tribal battle going on. So the themes are great, and the music's quite good. It's one of those Hammer films which dares to have a pop song as the theme in the beginning. So it's got this fantastic kind of song called "The Lost Continent," and in the same way that have you ever seen Dracula AD 72? It opens up with a scene where they have a band called Stoneground who are performing this pop song. So there is like almost a little subgenre of Hammer films where you get pop song at the beginning.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, did you know there was a 1968 remake of the movie,
Of
The Lost Continent?
well, there's a it's confusing because there is a film called The Lost Continent, I believe, which is the early dinosaur film.
Okay.
And this the Hammer film, which I think is a 1968 film,
Ah,
is it's just a coincidence that the titles are quite similar.
I see. Okay, so the 1968 film is the one you're referring to,
That's
not
right. Yeah.
the 1951 film.
Yeah.
Got it. Oh, interesting.
But it's great. It's one of the beauties of the film is that the boat, which is the contemporary boat, all the characters on there are all kind of escaping something. So basically, it's the last voyage of this boat. It's also, just for that added drama, packed with high explosives, which will explode on contact with water. So of course,
Mhm.
it's you know, it's a a scenario which is not going to be good for anybody trapped at sea. You know, with a hole that's being breached and seawater pouring in. Um, but yeah, there's somebody who's running away with money from some sort of dictatorship somewhere in South America. There's a criminal. There's a struck off doctor. There's an alcoholic. Yeah, there's this whole collection of people stuck on this boat together. So they've got their own battles as well. Then you know you throw in the man-eating kelp and the monsters as well, and the Inquisition. So it's completely bonkers. I've never seen anything like it.
It looks. I'm looking for where I can stream it. It looks like I might be able to find it somewhere, and I
Yeah,
will watch it. Graham, thank you so very much for spending this hour with us. This has been absolutely fascinating. What an amazing and storied career, and what a privilege it is for you to be working on our game.
and don't forget you can find some of the work in the most recent book, Nightmare on One Sheet, which has got a whole collection. There's record cover work, film poster work, Blu-ray stuff, book cover work as well. So this is all fairly new stuff as well. And I've got an introduction by Rob Zombie as well.
Wow. So and is this so thank you very much for reminding me about this. Is this book out yet?
It is, yes, it's been out for about a
All
year and a
right.
half.
And I'm putting the link into the chat, Carrero Press, and you could find a compilation of some of his more recent works in that book. And I'm sure it's a really it looks like a really gorgeous book. Do you mind holding it up just one more time?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. So
So I obviously it was a terrible pun I came up with. Obviously, because, relates to film poster work. So obviously, one sheet being standard format. So I'm not around one sheet. So I had to be careful because the images of Freddy and the whole Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is quite tightly controlled for copyright reasons and licensing. So you
sure.
can see that I've just put tears through the face, almost as if the knives have torn through the image. So you've got other characters peeping through. So it's Christopher Lee's Frankenstein there, for instance, and Dawn of the Dead at the bottom, and a few other kind of various characters peeping through.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a whole section on, as I said, record cover work. So let's see, find some of the stuff here for you. So yeah, for instance, this is the first cover I did for Waxwork Records, soundtrack for White Zombie, Rob Zombie Presents. So we've got the gatefold illustration, the actual record labels in there as well. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. The other thing I've got in here, which was quite important for me to put in there, was the whole process from beginning to end of a piece of work. So it shows where the initial reference comes from and the whole painting process from beginning to end as well.
Yeah, no AI there. We actually thank you very much also for giving us photos of your process for doing the artwork for our book, and it was quite brilliant to see it come together.
Oh, good. Well, I think it's important that people see there's no mystery to the process at all.
No.
I think some people would be quite guarded about their processes, but I think if I can encourage people to take up illustration, even if it's just a hobby, there is still work out there for us artists. I know a lot of people do work digitally, and that's perfectly valid as well, of course. And of course, we're all going to be fighting, hand and tooth against AI taking the work away. So that's something we're going to be looking at, as the next few years unfold. But yeah, I've never been busier, which is a great thing. I think there was a period of time when illustration fell out of favor when Photoshop was first made popular. So it almost like it seemed in about around 1990 that there would be no more illustration work for people like me, and then it suddenly just revived about 10 years after that. And as I said, I've never been busier. So there is work out there.
That's brilliant. In our particular industry, there's just no way around, the importance of the creative process, the human creative process, the illustration process. There's just no way around it. And was really refreshed when we saw your process, because it is everyone has their own different approach towards building their pieces. Some people do photo bashing. Some people start with 3D models, but they all get to the same thing, which is just a really beautiful original piece of art.
Good. Well, thank you for asking me to do the piece of work. It's a joy to work on.
Indeed. Well, Graham, thank you very much for spending the last hour with us. I really appreciate it. I know it's very late your time. And ladies and gentlemen, this was Graham Humphreys, the artist that did the cover art for the special edition of the Return of the Living Dead tabletop role-playing game, and obviously one of the most accomplished artists in the horror genre in general. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Nice to meet you, Dave.
You as well.